Well, we're going to finish up this focal here because we have to solder on the other U shape. So I just want to show you what I've done. I've just put my U shape at the top here. And it's important to have the bail done before you can actually do this part. And the reason being is because you need to make sure you're going to want to measure how much space you have in the first U. So if we get up really close, I've got a little bit more than a square. If I lay this on some grid paper, I can see I've got about one of these little squares is the size of that I need to keep open so it'll look nice and have the same kind of symmetry with my bottom part. So I'm going to, do the same thing down here. I'm gonna leave about a square in the middle. And what I've done is I've marked where these are gonna go. And I'm going to solder these little 4mm bezel cups up here just to kind of fill in the gaps so it doesn't look funny. Now for the cabs on this piece, this is optional. You don't have to put any cabs back here. You can just use balls and whatever else you want, or maybe metal stamps. You don't have to do the cabochons. I would recommend you don't do 5mm because they're very hard to fold the bezel over with the top piece on. So if you do the little cabs, I would recommend you do 4mm or just do balls or stamp. It's up to you. But I've just kind of laid out a design here, and I have to make sure that everything is out of the way so that when I put my top piece on, everything fits. One thing I will tell you with these little 4mm bezel cups, and my 4mm stones don't fit in some of them. I only found about 6 of them that worked, so I'm going to have to send the rest back to Rio. But it could be, I'm not sure if it was the 4mm cabs issue or that are a little bit bigger than 4mm, or the bezel cups just aren't quite right. My guess is it's the bezel cups. So if you buy your 4mm bezel cups from Rio, you might have issues with your stones not fitting. So make sure you get your stone inside of it before you solder on a bezel cup. That would be my advice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is empty all of these out. Before I do that, let me just show you. You have to make sure that you have room for these 3 connectors on the back before you solder on anything. So if you put this on your piece, like so, you have to make sure that any bezel cup that's on here, that you can get to it and get underneath it with a bezel pusher. Otherwise, you will not be able to get your little bezel cups to lay down. You won't be able to fold over the sides, okay? So it's really important that you don't put anything too far inside. And if you're not going to have room for it, then, just do a ball out here or something, depending on how you cut your pieces out. You can certainly just do balls. They'll be really pretty and they'll look gorgeous. So you get everything on there and get it centered. And what I would do is remove your bezel cups and take a little marker, take a little Sharpie and mark where your feet are going to be. So now you can see the feet inside, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little bitty mark here with my marker. And if you need a longer tip one, get the one you need. And I'm going to put a little mark there so that I know where this is going to go, okay? And at the top, I have to make sure that my 2 little bezel cups aren't touching anything. All right, so now if I lift this off, these little blue marks here are where my little feet are going to go. So make sure that those 2 bezel cups that we have upside down at the top here are not interfering with where the foot from your Indian piece is going to rest, where the tube is going to rest in there. That's really important to make sure that everything's spaced out properly. So go ahead and mark things with a marker, and then we'll go over to the bench and we'll solder these on. First thing I want you to do is take your top piece and paint it with ochre. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go inside the bezel cups, but just get your little balls on there and, cover everything up. We're just going to set this off to the side and let it dry, and we'll go back to our little flower and solder on the jump ring. So I'm going to want to heat in here from underneath, and I need to be able to get my torch under here. So I've spread apart again 2 of these honeycomb bricks, and I've used the same titanium clip, and I'm resting my wire on it just like we did in the last piece, so it doesn't slump down and it goes on straight. Okay, I have laid inside of the U-ring, I have laid a little sliver of solder on the U-ring on the inside parts. And then I also put 2 additional little chips around each bezel cup. The bezel cups are optional. You don't have to put those on if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but they do really make a nice part for the decoration. Just make sure they're spaced apart far enough so that your center foot on your top piece can sit down in there. It's really important. Okay, so torch is in my non-dominant hand, and I've got my pick in my dominant hand, and I'm wearing my magnifiers because these are small little pieces, and I really want my magnifying glasses. I really want to see what I'm doing. I'm just going to try to get this hot. Without actually going up on those wires yet. Okay, now I can add a little bit of flux. Just a light spray of flux. And I'm going to heat this thing up. Remember to keep your pick handy in case anything. Sometimes when those little chips start to turn into balls, they move. But they've got to be touching, and I'm not actually pointing my torch right on those little balls yet, and on any of these pieces yet. Just kind of heating up. You don't want to get too close. You don't have to be too close. Remember, the wire and the cups and everything have to be all the same temp. And I'm seeing some solder flow. This is easy solder, so it should go fairly quickly. Alright, so the cups are on. The wire is not yet. I'm going to turn this to the side a little bit so that I can get in here with my torch and wait for that to flow. I've got a piece of solder here that has not flowed right there. Might need a little bit more flux. Come from this side. Okay, and there it went. All right. Just take a good look and make sure everything's on there. I think I'd like to see one more piece of, so this piece, the solder came up onto the, let's zoom in here a little bit for you. This piece right here, the solder came up onto the wire and it didn't flow underneath. So I'm going to use some more solder and fill that in. Okay, so I went back in and added a piece of solder here and a piece of solder here, and I'm just going to heat that up one more time and make sure that this wire's on here really, really tight. I've also brought it down a little bit so I can kind of get underneath the piece and I don't have to be on top of it quite so much. Right, so I'm going to heat it up here, heating from underneath. Being careful not to focus right on the wire. You want to get the back plate hot. Alright, and it looks like it flowed there. Just going to lift it up and hit it a little bit. There we go. Alright, so now I've got a good join there. Okay, so I just want to pick this up and show you what I've got going on here. Okay, so I've got solder that's flowed all the way around this little cup, and it's a little messy, and that's okay because nobody's really going to see any of this part anyway. And this part is on really well too. Alright, so I'm going to pickle and clean it, and then I'm going to solder on all the other pieces at the same time. But that was the most important part. You have to get that straight, otherwise everything's going to hang weird. Now, what's really important is that you didn't scoot these too close together. And you could tell by taking your piece with the feet on the back and sitting it right on top and making sure that it still sits in the right place. Alright, if you get these too close together, that's not going to happen. It's going to cause your top piece to go up too high because it won't slide down where it's supposed to go. And see, once you get it right in the right place, this just kind of hangs there, and it's really easy to line it up, okay? Trust me, I thought about this. I know what I'm doing. Before we do anything, I want you to cover all of these areas, anywhere there's solder, nice and neat up there with some ochre. Now in the next clip here, I'm going to solder on all the back bezel cups and the balls. I recommend, if you're not very good at soldering, or this will be a lot easier if you just put the balls on now and go back and put the bezel cups on after you solder on the top piece, because it will be harder to do it the way that I'm doing it. But if you have the skill level, just go ahead and solder on all the bezel cups and balls now. But like I said, you can just solder on the balls and leave the bezel cups until after we solder on the top piece. It's up to you. Alright, I want you to see real well what I did here. I took, these are all flat pieces of solder, and I put them through my mill and made them flat. You can also hammer them, but they have to be flat, so they're going to roll and the cups are not going to sit on top of them. For each ball, I put one piece, and they're all pointing vertically. Well, they're all pointing this way, towards the points. None are going the other way. They're all horizontal, I guess, kind of. And then, so 1, 2, 3, 4 balls, right? And then where I'm going to do bezel cups, I got a big bezel cup going here, a 5mm here, a 5mm here, and down here I'm putting 2 really small 4mm bezel cups. Sorry, down here I'm putting 2 small 4mm bezel cups. So everywhere there's going to be something, that's where the solder is, and it's flat, so I can sit the cups on top of them without it being an issue. Okay, so I'm just going underneath and I'm heating everything. That ochre will turn nice and brown on there. I don't want that to splatter, because ochre does do that. I want to get this piece nice and hot, and I don't want that solder to move. If I put flux on there right now, the solder's going to move, and I don't really want that. So I just want it to stay put. Alright, now I will put some flux on there. Okay, and now I will put my bezel cups on top of, heat that up a little bit. I'll put my bezel cups on top of these, and I'm going to dip them in a little bit of flux, so they should stick on a little bit better. Right out to the end like that. Those bezel cups are all in place. Now the next thing I need to do is get my balls on. Ooh, scary balls. I've got 2 pieces of solder and they're hammered flat under each bezel cup, and I've got 1 piece under each ball, but you can put 2 flat pieces under your balls. And like I said, if your balls aren't flat, I recommend you heat them up on a charcoal block till they get a flat side, otherwise they're just going to roll right off. You won't be able to see, so I'm going to have to rotate. There we go. Now you'll be able to see everything. I'm going to go in from underneath. I've got my solder pick ready. Alright. Now I'm focusing my heat down here because I don't want to go right directly up on the piece just yet. It's okay if I burn up the block, but not if I burn up my silver. But you know, you don't want to reheat your piece a bunch of times because the more you reheat it, the more brittle it gets. And so it's, you know, the more things you can solder on at once, the better. It does take a little bit more skill, but I'm going to go right up in the center and just back and forth here. I don't want to touch those bezel cups or put any heat on them because if I do, they're going to melt. The balls are all on there now. I've just got some big pieces of solder underneath the bezel cups that need to flow. That was one. I'm just going to adjust it. There we go. And the other one's on right here. I'm going to adjust this one. Now number 3 over here. Turn this around and get over to this side here. Whoa, sorry, I'm looking at the camera and I'm trying to do it all at once. And I just need to get this guy down. Alright. I've got one here that isn't down, and that would be this one. Try to heat from underneath there. Well, I guess it is on. Okay, so they're all down. Just be sure you go back around them. Don't spend a lot of time. This one doesn't look flat, so I'm going to heat it again. Remember, anything that is getting hot can be a heat sink. These titanium clips are pretty good, but you know, they can still be a heat sink, so you just want to be careful. Okay, everything looks good to me. I've got 2 that I'm not real pleased with, so I'm just going to check those and make sure that they're okay, and I might need to reheat them. So 2 of my bezel cups hadn't flowed all the way, so I did go back and reheat those off camera, and but everything's good and it's on there now. I couldn't tell while I was filming, so I had to take a good look, but you can see now everything's flat, and there's no solder chips that haven't completely melted. Everything is flowed, and all the bezel cups are sitting flat, and you know, nothing's crooked, and that's what you're going for. Just make sure that there's no unmelted solder or that solder hasn't flowed, and if you need to reheat it, that's okay. When your piece is cooled off, set it on top of a flat surface and just lay your top decoration with the feet on it on top. You need to make sure that none of your balls or bezel cups underneath are in the way of the feet that are on the top portion. If they are, you know, just take a good look and make sure it's centered and nothing's obstructing or touching those feet, okay? And you have room to put it where you want it. Take a good look over the top and make sure it's centered. If anything needs to be adjusted, just simply put it back up on your titanium clips, heat from underneath, and slide the balls or bezel cups out of the way so that everything fits good, and then pickle it. Alright, so we got a piece out of the pickle, and we did it. It looks really good. Alright, so that wasn't so hard, was it? Just some balls and some bezel cups and a wire. So now the thing is that you're not going to really be able to clean this up very much. Once we put the top piece, you're not going to be able to get to any of this part in the inside. Nothing's going to really show because you have these balls in the corner, so that when you place your little piece on the top, people will look in from the side, but they will see the balls, you see? So they're not really going to see whether or not it's really very shiny. So you just want to double check your top piece. Make sure you can get to all the bezel cups, because you have to be able to get all the way around them to push your bezels over your stones, all right? So see how pretty that's going to be? I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Okay, so now we're going to take a 3M wheel. That's these little blue guys. I usually pile them up about 3 at a time. And I'm just going to tidy up around these bezels. So I won't be able to really get in here later. I give your piece a good scrub with a brass brush and some soap, and then we'll be ready to solder on the top piece. Before we solder on the top concho, I'd like you to just take a thin brush and just touch around the corners with a little bit of ochre. Make sure that when you look at the side of the foot, there's none more than, halfway down. You shouldn't have, it should look kind of like that, all right? All right, so once you have that done, we're going to take your plate and we're going to be doing some heating from underneath. Split apart your honeycomb blocks and set this up on 2 titanium clips. And we're just going to do one corner at a time, 1 foot at a time. Now you can see that little bezel cup is kind of in the way. So if you haven't put that bezel cup on yet, this might be easier for you. That's why it's always good to watch me do stuff and then decide how you want to do it. Lay a solder chip on each side of the foot. Make sure that the solder is touching the foot. And take a few moments to carefully make sure that your piece is centered, because if it's not centered after you get your solder chips on there and you solder your piece on, you're going to really not like the look of your pendant. So just take caution, make sure everything's centered. Get those 2 solder chips to touch the foot. This will be much easier if your bezel cup is not in the way and you haven't put it on yet. And then I'm going to turn on my torch. Heat from the bottom here. Now the top piece doesn't need to get hot, just the foot, because the foot is the only thing that is going to be getting soldered onto. So the foot and the back plate, the only 2 pieces really that need to get hot here. All right, now I'm going to give it a little bit of flux. And make sure you didn't blow your solder out of the way, because if you did, you'll have to put some more in there. Looks like mine's still on there, so that's good. Have your solder pick handy. And just heat from the bottom. Until you see everything start to flow. I'm going to come up from the top because I need to get that foot hot too. And I'm just going to go inside, trying not to touch the bezel cup, but I just want to touch the foot. Okay, there we go. I just saw a bunch of solder flow. And then the same here, I want to come in from the side. Staying off the bezel cup, but I want to touch that foot. Okay, I saw that flow too. So it looks to me like this bottom foot is connected, and that looks good. Now I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing on the other side. On all 3 corners you have to do this. And I'll let you watch me because I know it's a bit tricky, but it really is doable. Once you get an attachment, you don't have to worry about anything moving on you, so it gets much easier from here on out. The first one is the hardest. All right, so I put a couple pieces of solder again next to each of these feet. I don't know if you can see them in there. There's one on that side. There's one on that side, on this side here. And now I'm just going to heat it up first with no flux, and then I'll go back and add the flux. Also, if you were using the M4 for the whatever tip you were using, I'm using the M3 to get into these tiny bits. Sometimes I use the M4 for the bigger stuff, but the M3 from Page Tools is perfect, and you can get a really small flame, and you don't have to overheat. And you can get right inside of here without, making too much of a mess. If you're using this Air Silversmith torch with acetylene, I would probably use the size 0 tip for this part. All right, so I've got that sitting where it's not sitting. The part that I'm going to be soldering on doesn't have a titanium clip touching it, because they do kind of make little heat sinks. Not too much, but little. I'm just going to heat it, heat it. You don't need to get right on top of it. You don't need to get too close. your torch back away a bit. And it starts to heat up there. I'll go in and I'll add some flux. Alright, now come back underneath. Have your solder pick handy in case you need to grab it and do anything. And as soon as you see that solder flow, move up, and there we go, and touch the feet so that it goes onto the feet, okay? It's got to be on those feet. Try not to touch the bezel cup. Touch that bezel cup, it's going to be a big mess. All right, that's number 2 on. So before we solder the top piece, I'm going to put some ochre all around the wire because I don't want that to melt or to have any issues. Okay, straight bar across and propping it up on the top with a little bit of ochre on the wire. So now I can get right in underneath and on the side, okay? So I'm going to first take a little piece of solder, really thin piece, and set it right on top here. Okay, remember, don't touch the wire with your torch, or you will be sorry. I'm just getting it hot underneath here, just bringing some heat up there. All right, when it gets hot, I'm going to hit it with the, come back up in the top here, hit it with some flux, and then let it flow. Do not touch the wire, please. Just stay underneath for as long as you can. But do remember that you can get a little heat sink from the titanium clip, so you have to be careful. And come back in through the top, through the side. And keep your torch a good distance away. You don't need a super hot torch either. You can make your flame nice and tight. Okay, it's starting to melt there. And through the side, just grazing over, keeping my torch moving so that nothing... There it goes, it melted, okay? Just gonna come around. There we go. So in and out. In and out, like the burger place. We have those in California. Okay, so there we go. We are done. I'm gonna let that cool for a minute. So quench and pickle your piece, scrub it with a brass brush, and throw it into the tumbler for about 10 minutes. Okay, so I've taken my piece out of the tumbler. You're probably going to get a lot of stainless steel shot that's going to get lodged in between here. So you'll want to use something plastic like a Q-tip, all right, and just poke it out and keep working it until you get it all out. And that's really the best you're going to be able to do. As far as the polishing goes, you can use some white polish on the back. If your piece is scratchy on the back, what I'd recommend you do is use a split mandrel with a piece of sandpaper. So you want to put this into your mandrel with the sandpaper facing toward you, and then turn it, and then just simply go across the back until you get it nice and smooth and there's no scratches in it. This is really the best way. If you try to use a polishing pin or a Kratex wheel, you're going to get divots. That's really the best way to do it, okay? Alright, and then if you want to go over that with some polish, you can use a muslin buff with some white polish, which I'll show you in a moment. Now in the front, you're probably going to have a lot of solder spills and things like that you might want to clean up. My advice is to leave them because we're going to patina this piece and you're not going to see, unless they're horrible, you know. But if you try to go in with a Kratex wheel or even a polishing pin and something that's pointed and round, let's see if I have something to show you, anything like this, what's going to happen is you're going to end up having uneven metal and it's not going to look good. So I would really encourage you to just leave those alone and go in with a couple of tools. If you have any white residue from the pickle, you can use just a bristle brush that you can get from Rio. This is just a bristle brush, and go in and get all of that out. You might want to even do this, you know, and then throw it back in the tumbler if you want to, but this will, you'll see the white dust coming off. That'll take most of that out.
You can also use a brass brush on the end of your flex shaft to remove. You can use this both to remove excess polish and to remove any white residue that you might find. Or if you want to just clean up any of your bezel areas, this would be the best tool for it.
And you can get all of the polish, or you know, if you decide you wanted to do some white polish on this, you'd have to use a Q-tip, a pointy Q-tip cut in half, and then stuck in the end of your flex shaft like this with some white polish or rouge on it. And then you could go in and polish out all of these. But you probably don't need to do that if you put it in the tumbler. And then this little brass brush will go in and help you remove also any anything that looks funky, and will also help you polish up everything. You want to get all that white stuff out before you do the patina. Don't worry too much, because the patina is going to actually cover up a lot of this, okay? But use this as a polishing, cleaning up. Don't try to use any rubber, silicone, Kratex polishing wheels, anything like that, because all you're going to do is make the metal really uneven, because you're working on a flat surface here, and it's going to just make divots in your metal. So I really don't recommend you do that, okay? So that's what I recommend. All right, once you get it the way you want it, you can throw it in the ultrasonic. If you don't have an ultrasonic, you can just spray some window cleaner on it, non-ammoniated window cleaner. You don't want to use the kind that has ammonia, because that's kind of a patina for your metal, and that will help you take off any polish or anything. And just to show you what the white polish does, I'll just do the back here. So you want to take a muslin buff, and you can use rouge or Luxie white is one I like. Comes in a bar, and just put a tiny bit, you don't need much, and then you just lightly go over the back of your piece like this. You can see how it's beginning to polish, and it'll leave it kind of dark for a minute. So you just keep going over it, and then you'll need to remove this with a soft cloth, or if you have a big buffing wheel, you can polisher. You can use that too. Just be careful. This will also help take out all the marks from the sandpaper that we just used. And like I said, if you want to do that on the front, you do that with a Q-tip stuck in the end, a pointy Q-tip stuck in the end of your flex shaft like this. Same procedure, and then you just go in and you polish. All right, and then you can remove all that with those brushes I showed you. All right, and then to remove the back part, I would just take a soft cloth and just polish it real well. And then mine will go into the ultrasonic. But like I said, if you don't have an ultrasonic, you can just use one of these pointy Q-tips dipped in some ammoniated cleaner, and it will take all that off. Okay, so that is how I would polish your piece. Now once you get it all polished, if you want to add patina, I'm going to add patina to mine. You want to do all the patina and all of that way long before you set the stones. Setting stones is always the last thing you do. So
that's how you use the white polish. Now, if you want to add patina, I'll show you how.
I'm going to show you how to patina this piece, and then you can decide if you want to do it or not. And you can patina all of your pieces if you want to. But I'm only going to demonstrate it on the one piece. All right, so when I patina, I have a piece of plastic down because it gets all over the place, and you don't want patina on your workbench sticking to something that you don't want patina on. Have your piece handy here. Excuse me. I like Midas Black Max. It's my favorite patina, and that's the one because it gets nice and black, and it seems to last, and I like it. This is an acid. Okay, so be careful with it and read the first aid instructions on the back. You should also wear a mask when you put this on. So put on your little mask and make sure that you don't inhale it. I'm going to put mine on right here. If you use liver of sulfur, that's okay too. I don't like dipping the piece because I don't like getting patina inside of my bezel cups, okay? So I don't ever dip. And I don't always like patina all over the whole thing. So you can do it with a Q-tip or you can do it with a brush. Now the difference between doing it with a brush and a Q-tip is this. You're going to get more patina with a brush. You'll get more patina on it with a brush than you will with a Q-tip. So if you want to do it sparingly, you might want to use a Q-tip. I just pour a little bit into the cap. Okay, I get my Q-tip wet and make sure you don't have any on your fingers or it's going to go in places you may not want it. And just put the patina where you want the patina. If you want to patina everything, then put it everywhere. If you just want to get it in the crevices, just put it in the crevices. It's totally up to you. A lot of people will just put it everywhere and then wipe off the excess, and that's okay too, because it kind of just ends up going everywhere. But I find it looks really good, like around bezel cups and around balls, just in all the crevices. So usually what I do is I put a lot of patina on and then I take it all off, almost all of it. It does kind of change the look of your silver because, like I said, it's an acid, so it's going to make it look kind of old, and that's kind of what we want for this piece. So if you want to patina just the top, you can do just the top. If you want to patina the whole thing, you do the whole thing. I will say that the patina will help hide a lot of the sins that are going to be inside of this piece because there's parts you can't get to clean. So, but I would not let the patina, I would use a Q-tip for this part because unless you want it to go all inside and stay black in there, that's okay too. It's just really up to you. The black patina all inside there might look kind of cool so that when people look in, they just see black. You'll never be able to get it out once you get it in there, so just make sure that that's what you want to do. And you can also polish your piece after. I find if I polish my piece though before, I usually do polish before and after, just to be honest with you, because it seems to take better. The patina seems to take better if I do that. Okay, so here we have our piece all patinaed. Now I'm going to go soak it in baking soda water. I'm not going to do that on camera, but you guys can figure out how to just take some lukewarm water, 1 cup of lukewarm water, and a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda in a little bowl. Let it sit for 2 minutes, and then come back and I'll show you how I. Okay, I'm back, and my piece has been sitting in these baking soda water here for a couple of minutes. I'm going to take it out and I'm going to put it on my paper towel, and this is kind of messy. So what I do is I break off a little piece of steel wool, because once that steel wool gets white, it's no good. And I just start rubbing. And now the thing with the steel wool is if you just rub along the top, it's only going to take it off the top parts and it will keep it down in the crevices. You have to decide how much patina you want on your piece. You might want a lot. You might not want so much. It really depends. It can look really cool to leave a lot on there, and it can look really cool to not have any. So it's really totally up to you. But with all the soldering, little edges and stuff, this will the more patina you leave on there, the more it will hide that stuff. So you really just have to kind of decide. Now there's several ways to remove patina. You can use you can use brushes. You can use steel wool. I've heard people use all kinds of cool stuff, and it just depends on what kind of a look you want. I also sometimes if I remove too much, I can go back and add a little bit more. The harder you rub, the more you're going to take off. So
Shading with patina is its own art. It really is.
you can use a steel brush in your flex shaft too. A lot of people even use 3M wheels to take it off because they like to leave it in certain places. So once again, this is all up to you. If you want to leave a lot of it on the base, if you want to just leave a little bit of it on the base, it does tend to wear off after time. So if you put a lot on there now, it's not always going to be on there. But a piece like a pendant, it doesn't get handled so much, so it'll stay on there longer than it would, say, on a ring or something. Use your creative, artistic genius If you do polish over this, go back with some white polish. Just remember, if you put it in the tumbler, you got to deal with all that shot getting stuck inside, and that's going to look funky. So you may not want to do that. Okay, so I've got about all I can with the steel wool that I can get off. Okay, so I'm going to go in now with my brush, my bristle brush. Right, so there's lots of different, techniques you can use to remove it. There's all sorts of different brushes. You can use a brass brush to shine and polish, but that really won't remove too much. There's some other examples of bristle brushes that you can get, and they're really stiff, and you can use those as well. And once you get it where you like it, you can stop, and if you want to add some white polish after that, it would be. Okay, so this is my final piece here. And what I did is I removed almost all the patina. I did not want to put it back into the tumbler and deal with the shot. So I simply took some more white polish on a muslin buff. First I scrubbed it really well with a brass brush just to get it shiny. And then I put a little bit of white polish on my muslin buff and repeated the process I showed you earlier. All right. And then I took a soft cloth and some Q-tips and got off as much of that as I could. And on the back, you don't ever want to leave a lot of patina on the back. And I'll tell you, not on a necklace anyway, because if it's going to be hitting someone's shirt, that's going to come off and leave a tarnished spot. So I like to put a really good coat of polish on the back of the piece. So I just went and polished it back up again with my white polish, buffed it out, and inside the bezel cups, I had some little patina. So I just took you can take a little end of something sharp and scrape it out. You want to get these really clean. If you have a really tiny ball burr or one of these cone burrs, little bitty ball burrs work really well. But these are just shaped like little sticks, okay, on the end. And you can stick those down inside your tiny tube sets. And just be careful you're not cutting the sides. So whatever tool you have to get in there and scrape it up, because we're going to be putting clear CZs in here. We want the insides to be, not black. So that's why it's really important to get that all out of there.
We're now done with the Indian focal, except for the stone setting, which we'll do a little bit later. So you can set this aside, and we're going to talk about the cowboy connectors in the next portion. Okay, so just some thoughts on patina. It really is, to me, it's an art form. It's shading your piece, and it's very personal, and that's why you go back and forth with the tools you want to get the look you want.